Mbak ya, sebentar ya, Sekar ya, kamu.
Udah saya broadcast. Ini mau recordingnya.
At one decision, but we probably need only 8 steps of activities to get the same decision. So the question here is, are there opportunities, quick opportunities that you can gain from streamlining the business process, from the work of the work process? Make it simpler, for example. In some cases, do you have to report to so many hierarchies? Is there opportunities to adjust the management spans or span of control, the hierarchy, for example? Is there any way that you can replace some of the routine work with not so expensive technology to replace the work? Because we know anything that is routine and repeatable can be replaced by technology. So these are some of the possible options that companies can do. Big question on optimizing reward spend. What does that mean? If it is possible, what we are putting here may not be easy to implement or may not be easy to implement locally, legally, because it also depends on the regulations. But optimizing reward spend is, especially in companies where you don't have a lot of employees and you don't have unions, is it possible to convert some of the fixed cost compensation, for example, allowances, cash allowances, into something which is performance related but variable? So instead of getting fixed $10 per month on specific allowances, is it possible to convert that into something else which is variable, not guaranteed, and linked to performance? Of course, you need to have a consent from people, but these are some of the ideas or thoughts, and some companies have done that actually. And obviously, it's easier where you're not unionized, but the principle is there. On the third wave, when you come to the stage where the pressure to cost optimize continues, but you ran out of options on the quick cost cutting, think about how you can either optimize your workforce, do more with less, or do more with the same. You don't have to do less, but can you do more with the same? So for example, there is an opportunity here to quickly accelerate the development of your talent. Stefan will deep dive on that later on, but when we say strategic workforce optimization, is not necessarily cutting headcounts, but how can we use people to do other things? I've seen companies, for example, doing a stock taking because the shops are closed, so they do a stock taking. They put all the, to make it fast, rather than doing a stock taking for a week, they make it 2 days, but they put other people from other functions to help them with stock taking. Now, it keeps people busy. You don't cut headcount, but at least it gives opportunity for people to do other things as well. If you have to do divestitures, capex cuts, we've talked about that. So these are some of the things that it is more long-term, to be stronger in the longer run, post-crisis. We can share some examples later as we go. So what the crisis has taught us, I think, based on Conferry research globally, we know that we can be agile as we thought it could be. We may be afraid in the beginning, but I think working from home taught us that we can be agile. In fact, one of the comments that I heard from some clients is, we make decisions faster by doing Zoom calls because you don't have to do chit chats in your opening. 1 hour becomes a real 1 hour problem solving time. So you can be more decisive. Some companies do check-in, check-out. Every morning, every afternoon, check-in and check-out. And people say they actually feel more connected than others, even with multinationals, cross countries. So probably they have not met the CEO or regional CEO for a while, but with the check-in, check-out, people can see using the video. So it is quite interesting how this new type of work has given us. Many companies that I admire actually took the time during this downtime to be closer to their customer. Sales is not easy, but at least this is the time that they can reach out to customers, not really selling, but linking to the empathy side, because empathy can be both ways, internally towards your people, but also empathy towards the customers. So both customer centricity and empathy plays a big role in trying to keep people engaged. Either it's your internal people or your stakeholder outside. And I won't say a lot about innovation, because we've heard a lot about innovation that came from an accident, unplanned action that create new things. So think about what we can do, or new things, new products. One of my clients shared with me new products that have not been available before, after this crisis or during this crisis. For example, the glass or the plastic walls between the cashier and the customers. So that gave opportunity for some industries to create those products, new products, those kind of things. So that's interesting. So if I zoom in on how you can optimize the cost from your organization, is typically our organization can be hierarchical to some extent, very hierarchical. But if you have to do more with same, let alone do more with less, I think any increase beyond 15% or any cost cutting beyond 15%, we cannot just do that from cost cutting. We have to change something. We cannot just do better with what we have done so far. To go anything beyond 15%, I think we have to do things differently. So from an organization viewpoint, we talked about streamlining the process. But the other thing is there any possibility that we reduce the hierarchy? I'm not saying that we reduce the layers of organization, but work in a more, quote unquote, agile or dynamic way, so that people can be multi-skilled in doing things. It gives you two advantage. First, you get the things done, but at the same time, you expose people to new things. So I'm sure many of you have experienced that you are changing the way you work because of this pressure. So think about reducing levels of hierarchy to make it more seamless, more lean in decision-making and so on. If you're very structured in silo, for example, like in a manufacturing setup, it was understandable where the skills developed should be siloed because there's a very highly specific skills within each of the department. But if there are similar skills, can you group them together so that people can learn from not only in their skills that are identical to what they have to do, but also learn other things? So for example, operations to maintenance, finance to tax to accounting, those kind of things. The third thing is, like we mentioned before, versatile smart teams. The fancy word now is about the teams that work in certain cross-functional work to develop something within 3 months and then dismantle again, and is very popular in the e-commerce setup. And then finally, the ecosystem, because I think idea is good, but once it is not implemented because the ecosystem is not there, I think it is going to be a challenge. And by ecosystem, we meant that how the leadership can nurture this new environment and how the organization can create empathy on how things that concerns people most. Because when you change the way of work, people can be concerned as well. So how do you see that to be handled? We've talked about the introducing cross-functional community of expertise, because this is where we can have a twofold advantage of exposing people to new things like reskilling. Many companies now talk about reskilling because jobs will change after this, at least some of it, majority. So for example, we've seen, we've been in discussion with many organizations to look at what are the jobs that would be eliminated, would be changed, becomes contingent. For example, we don't need these 8 hours a day by 7 days, but probably we just need as we need. So there could be a lot of partnership cross business. So it's more of a B2B rather than hiring skills permanently. Or in some cases, because you have to multitask, multi-role, multi-hats, job can be elevated. So these are some of the things that we have to watch out for in the new normal. this is just sharing a bit of a survey that we did in the last 2 months about how you score yourself if you want to against the industry norm in terms of how agile you are, how focused, how purpose-led the workforce is, how adaptive the leadership is, especially in this crisis. It is interesting to see that the standard norm, the difference between the horizontal bar and the line is the mean across industry, whereas the bar is the industry specific score. So for example, if you're in a certain industry, and we can cut this by industry, what is the norm as opposed to the general industry? So for example, if you look at agility, I think there is not a big gap between the specific industry and the general industry in terms of how agile you need to be. So we can conclude that one of the things for the new normal is that you are expected to be more nimble organization. And it is interesting when you talk about nimbleness, it's about ability to learn new things. See, at the organization level, we talk about agility. At the individual level, to translate agility is about how nimble are we in learning new things. If we can't learn new things, we won't be able to work in an agile organization. So these are some of the findings that we had. And then these are some of the remarks that we had from our survey as what kind of changes have you made to become better in the new normal? So they said closer as teams. We have more collaborations. We became less hierarchical, and therefore decision-making become faster. We are more open up to remote working as we haven't thought before, and so on. One of the pressure from one of the sector client that we had, which is property, is many tenants think about, do they need the big space that they employ today? Because with 50% of people working at home, that it turns out that things can continue. So there is a lot of pressure of how do we utilize our fixed asset better. Yeah. So that is a couple of things, and these are from a leadership perspective. What do they think? Some of the tips to go through this crisis: be more empathetic, more communication, more open communications. Use any kind of means of communications that you can. Open up, be approachable by your people. The good thing about Zoom is, Stefan and I ran one time Zoom with 400 participants. I just can imagine that even organizations with thousands of employees, if they do this kind of check-in, check-out, they can be connected directly to people at the shop floor level. So these are some of the things that we learn from our clients, what advantage or benefit they have received, blessing in disguise from this crisis. So let's talk about, if you want to do some changes, where do we begin? Let's look at the accountabilities. Are we sure that the organization has been designed in such a way that people are clear about the accountabilities? Is there any overlap? Is there any gap? Is there any replicable processes that we can streamline? Look at some of the agile capabilities or people and functions that need to be more nimble than others. We have from the people side and also from the job design side. And not least is the purposeful identity, meaning going back to the core roots. Why do we have to do this? Because I think this crisis has probably hit the core of our belief system, and that things that we have not been able to do, actually we are able to do. So I think there is a good reason why we need to repurpose for the new normal, because situation may be different. Okay, so that's the side on cost optimization. There's another side of the equation, which is how to lead in and how to lead through crisis, which Stefan will take through. But let me just respond to one question from Pak Fajar. Many of the businesses across Indonesia suddenly face uncertainty now that the majority of the workforce are required to work remotely. My question is, if many of our businesses are used to thriving in a face-to-face environment, how can we pivot to a digital sales marketing model such short notice? Second question, did you see any cut-off employment in pharmaceutical sales force? This is interesting. So the first one is, how can? We can. We did, actually. We have seen, for example, this webinar. I don't know about Stefan, but I think in the last 2.5 months, I've done more than a dozen webinars. That's using technology or e-channel to reach out to customers, to talk to customers. I know for a fact that in some of the e-commerce, their revenue actually shot up based on this. The retail, if I could just go back to the previous slide, yeah. If you look at this number, retail is down by 70-something%, but that's the online, sorry, the offline stores, the shops. But some of the online retail business actually went up. So I think there is an opportunity, and some have taken the opportunity to use that e-channel to reach out to customers. So my point is, how can? We can, because we are pressed by the external factors. If we are not in a swim or sink situation, our mindset tends to say, it's not urgent, it's not important, we can do that later, we can change later. But now it's not like that. And have we seen any kind of employment in pharmaceutical sales force? I am not too sure, actually, but logically, rationally, it's not cut off, but cost cutting, yes. Because especially for Indonesian pharmaceutical, you know, one big cost item in pharmaceutical is product innovation, product development, R&D. And with that, with many of the, depends on which type of medicine that they're producing. But if you, obviously the generic drugs are more volume and cheap, but margin is smaller compared to the patented products. But the patented products need to have a lot of upfront cost for investment. So I guess the reality is cost cutting has been done in those sectors, but employment cut, I think it's another thing. So let's move on to the leadership part while I'll browse through the question, and I'll later on at the end, I can jump in back on the cost optimization question. Stefan, over to you. I'll run the slide for you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Selamat pagi, everybody. Good morning, wherever you're from. So let me share with you. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, got it.
Okay. All right. So share the screen. You cannot share the screen while the other. Okay, very good, very good. Okay, excellent. So yeah. So basically, right. So we talk about, you know, and here today I'm here to talk about like how to develop as a leader and how to develop your team as well, right? So a lot of arguments that we hear from clients now is that just like we talked about, Pasil was talking about cost optimization, right? So one of the first items that typically go when we try to cut costs for companies is development and leadership development, right? So we get a lot of reasons, right? We don't have the time, we're busy, we're in the middle of the crisis, we're focused on other things, we're too busy. In fact, you know, today, we're here today to tell you one message. This is the best time now to learn. Yes. Why? Because we're saying so? Because we want to sell stuff? Perhaps, yes. But more importantly, because there's research and evidence that points to that evidence. Okay, next part. I think, you know, you're still handing the baton. Thank you very much. So why? Well, I think, you know, this is a core picture that really shows you why this is the best time now. Because when you're not challenged, yeah, when there's no crisis, it's easy to learn, right? So when you have a simulated crisis, this is better. Yeah, this is better. You learn more, but you definitely learn more when there's a real crisis. Learning by doing. Next. Okay. So at Korn Ferry, we have what's called our 70-20-10 model of leadership development. 70%, which means experiential, like learning by doing. This is using principles of adult learning. 20% is social, right? So from your coach, from your mentor, from your peers, right? Social, sharing knowledge between each other. And then the 10% is the actual concepts, which are very important. It's the percentage of time, not the percentage of importance. The concepts themselves are very important as well. Otherwise, you have nothing to practice, right? So I mean, there are many issues now that we can we can focus on, right? So you have how to contain costs, which we shared in detail. Pascal was mentioning that earlier. How to become innovative, how to engage the staff, right? How to increase or to change the focus of our sales. I was talking to a client in the insurance industry yesterday, and they're trying to change the mindset of their executives and leaders, right? Instead of being farmers like they used to be, instead of relying on agency only, now they need to go directly, right? Directly, they need to be hunters. They need to become hunters. So this requires a complete mindset shift. That's why we're doing two things for them. We're changing their mindsets, right, to more commercial mindset, and also we're helping them on the technical side of sales effectiveness. So that's what we're doing for them, right? Yeah. So next, so absolutely, as I was mentioning earlier, there is strong, solid scientific evidence that says that adversity provides great learning opportunities. Yeah. So you know that instinctively in your bones. You know that you learn better when you have a tough time, because on the stress curve, if there's no stress at all, likely you're not going to learn. If there is too much stress, yes, you're not likely to learn very much. That's why when you put yourself or your team in situations where they need to learn, they need to know that you support them, yeah, with empathy, and also that they can fail to a certain degree, right, within limits, within reason, right? Otherwise, if they don't feel psychologically safe, they will not learn very much. They will be focused more on survival. And when you're just focused on survival, you don't learn as well. But adversity does provide very good learning opportunities. This is a picture of a flight simulator, right? And this is very much like a real flight. You know, I've been in one of those, and let me tell you, I can't be a pilot. Because this is very realistic, right? I've tried one of these simulators before in the past, and this is too realistic, very scary. So I could not learn very well in that environment. But in terms of in terms of learning experience, crisis provides, adversity provides the best means to learn. And next, so does learning in teams. So does learning in teams. So as a leadership team, there's also a very strong evidence that you learn better as a team, right? If you just learn individually, this is great, but this does not become ingrained in the culture, does not become ingrained in your protocol, your standard operating procedures as a leadership team. Therefore, it's very important to have that. That's why one of the things that we do at Korn Ferry is we always involve the board of directors in the leadership program. How do we do that? Typically they would not want to spend so much time on it, but we make it a business issue. Leadership development is really a business issue. It's not an HR issue. It's a business issue. And we do that in a number of ways. We have 3 ways to do that. So one way is to involve them as coaches. Yes. Typically, directors, they like to be coaches. They don't know how. So we help them. We structure the process for them. And we help them become better coaches. We help them become better mentors. Yeah? We invite them in fireside chats where they share about their experiences. And also they become sponsors for key projects, key initiatives. I'm going to talk to you more about that a little bit later. So, that's what it is. So there is strong evidence, right? In other words, that crises are very good learning opportunities, both for the individual, for the team, and for the organization. And that learning as a group leads to better results, better financial results, business results, and culture overall. Okay. Next. So how do we turbocharge leadership development during the crisis? So first, we need to identify the business priorities, right? What are the key business priorities that you need to focus on? I mean, including ourselves here today, I think, a lot of people are trying to tell you a lot of things about what you should be doing. And as a leader, at the end of the day, you need to figure out what makes the most sense for me. Yeah. What makes the most sense for me, for my situation, the situation of my company, and frankly speaking, where does the evidence lead to me? Because there's a lot of advice out there that is not based in evidence. It's based in opinions, and opinions are great, but they're not as strong as clear-cut evidence based on history, based on research. Right? So, in other words, we need to prioritize as business leaders into must-win battles, right? Where to cut, not to cut in the muscle, like we mentioned earlier, right? So we need to figure that out. Now, once we have that, then we need to identify, right? So I was sharing with, we were sharing, me and Pasil yesterday in a webinar about what type of leaders are required in the rebound. Right? Because we're in the crisis, but we're getting into the rebound, right? Optimistically in the next few months or so, right? So what types of leaders do you need in this rebound? Well, you need action-oriented leaders, yeah? We need leaders that are courageous, that show resilience, that are optimistic, right? That are organized, yeah? So you need these types of leaders. And one of the things that we're very strong at here is to assess. You need to assess your leaders on these competencies, because what got you here may not get you there in the future, correct? So the types of leaders that you had in the past, pre-COVID, may not be able to get you there during and post-COVID, yeah. And you may want to assess yourself as well, yes, in terms of, and this is not done in a spirit necessarily to say, look, not in a negative way, in a developmental ways, right? We often, one of our clients, right, I was talking to one of our clients recently, and we do a lot of coaching. We do a lot of coaching, and we have what's called a leadership style assessment. And we have very, very strong points of view as to how to develop different types of leaders. Leadership style is not fixed. You can develop it, right? And that's the point, right? So how to become a better leader in times of crisis, how to become a better leader for the future economy. We can talk about that later on and another time, but actually these are very, very important points to make. Next.
Hi, Stefan. Just
Yes.
Because you're talking on that point, there's a question from Arun here for you, is that leading in crisis is not something that we have experienced before. So how do we deal with leaders who is naturally excellent in visions and in growing the business, but lack of judgment during crisis?
So excellent in vision and
in growing the business, but lack of judgment during the crisis.
Oh, that's a very good question. Thank you for sharing that, right? So you're in luck, because if you have a visionary leader, you still need that, right? So we have what's called the ADAPT, the self-disruptive leader ADAPT model, right? So, and there's 5 competencies that are very important, right? So one of which is to anticipate, and one of it is to drive. So to anticipate, make quick judgments with vision, sharing vision with clarity. So this is very good. If you have leaders that are good in sharing the vision, this is really what you need in this time, right? However, to make judgments in crisis, I think partly perhaps what's behind your question, and I'd be interested to learn more about that, is perhaps it's panicking, right? So panicking. I think, you know, in these times, you can only make 80-20 decisions, right? Therefore, maybe two things to concentrate on. Instead of concentrating on lag indicators, you need to concentrate on lead indicators. You know, try to predict what the future will come. Nobody has a crystal ball, but at least, you know, try to shift your measures. Try to measure what matters, to shift your measures to make better decisions. Second is, even with that information, with this new data, you will not make perfect decisions, right? So you need to be able to tolerate ambiguity. Yeah. Therefore, I would work with these leaders, with these leaders or this particular leader, to try to work with him or her on how to improve tolerance of ambiguity, because this is really an important competency that leaders need in the future. So that's what I would like to share there with. Okay, so the second thing in turbocharging leadership development is actually one of the things I'd like to share with you, and that we'd like to share with you this morning, is the Action Learning Project methodology, or ALP methodology. I don't know if you've ever heard about this, but this is very powerful. This is one of the things we strongly believe in at Korn Ferry here. That's very powerful. Why? Because it's part of, and in fact, it forms the backbone of the 70-20-10 experiential, right? What happens? What is Action Learning Project? So picture this. What we do is we take the let's say five key initiatives for the BOD. Let's say you have a BOD of 5 members, right? Finance, supply chain, production, so forth and so on, right? So you have 5 or 6 different directors. They all have specific challenges, things that keeps them up at night, right? They think, wow, you know, so typically things that are future oriented. How can we cut costs without cutting the muscle, right? How can we engage our people? How can we modify our supply chain? How can we change our relationship with our vendors and things like that, right? Many, many things. Each of the directors will have things that keeps them up at night. Now, the beauty of ALP is that it facilitates and accelerates the process in identifying the problem itself and into solving the problem more effectively and efficiently. So it's a process that does that. So what we do is we identify key talent groups and we put them into groups, 4 or 5. Typically, these are your best and the brightest, right? Those that are the most engaged, the more capable. Not the most engaged and the more capable in typical times. Yeah, that's why you need to reassess your talent right now to say, during this crisis, after this crisis, who are our high potentials, top potentials? Bring them together. Yeah, bring them together, assign them to these particular must-win battles. Must-win battles. Okay. And then then what we do is we deploy them. We deploy them in action learning projects. Therefore, we have, so what we're doing right now with a client of mine, and Pafajar, you were mentioning about the pharmaceutical industry. This is one of our clients is in the pharmaceutical industry. And so we redirected the action learning projects from plain vanilla to COVID-19 action learning project. What does that mean? We identified the key issues that the directors were more concerned about, and we assigned them to the participants, right? The seminar participants. And then, you know, we clearly identified, we helped them identify what the core issue was. Therefore, the identification of the problem is very important. We need to make sure that we don't solve the wrong problem. Otherwise, you just wasted your time, right? So spending the necessary time at the end to find the evidence is very important. So we do that. We have different gates that we have to go through. The interim presentation, where the group presents to the total group without the directors, right? And they get some feedback. They get some feedback about the solution, about the identification of the problem, the potential solutions, right? Then, you know, you have the final presentation that you do with the directors. See, this is the solution that the best and the brightest came up with following a structured process, right? And then, next slide, and then this is about the implementation, right? Implementation. So yes, so the implementation. So this is a little bit about, this slide is a little bit about the process, right? Action, reflection, a little bit similar to what you have in design thinking as well, right? So it's iterative, yeah. That's why this one element, why it's so good, it's because it's iterative, right? It allows you to fail in a safe environment. Therefore, it allows you to learn in a safe environment, right? So this is part of the white belt mentality, that you're just open to learning, just open to trying different things. Yes, this situation is stressful. Yes, it's painful, but this is why we need to accelerate the learning process, just because there's no precedent, yeah, or there were very few precedent to this situation. Next. Okay, and this is it, yeah. This is all we have. So here, I think, you know, we can welcome questions. This is the time for questions.
I think, Stefan, I think there is last questions from, sorry, let me put my video here. I think last questions from Fajar, I believe. Yeah, I think
Thank
so.
Thank you for your participation, Fajar. Yeah, that's very engaged. You have a very engaged participant. Very good.
Yeah, I think what he asked is about about education. So let me see. Can you see the questions there? For some reason, it's missing here.
No, I can see it. I can see it. It's
right.
You know, if
sorry, I lost you a bit, Stefan. The network was down, but this is the last slide, I believe.
Okay, I see. Yeah, yes, I was mentioning, right? So how to turbocharge the development. It's the key last point I wanted to make before we address Papaja's question is that organizational learning is important. Therefore, there is so many good lessons that we can learn from this crisis and during this crisis. As an organization, our responsibility and as leaders is to document these, right? To make sure that we're more resilient and we're more sustainable. And, you know, for the next crisis, which will happen 3, 5, 7, 10 years from now, it will happen. We know that, right? We've lived long enough to see this. How can we become more resilient, all right, for the next few crises? So how can we learn as an organization what works, what doesn't work? Yeah, so I think this completes the concept aspect of this this presentation, and I'm happy to address Papajar's question here. So sharing, okay. So he's a father of school children. Very good, Papajar, you know, and so am I. So it may be hard to believe now, but only 3 months ago, education was business as usual. The important pieces of advice to give to the Ministry of Education, struggling to make this transition to millions of students and teachers. Oh, I see. Yeah, I think, you know, it's so thank you very much for the question. I think it's probably beyond my expertise to answer this question, but I'll just venture my opinion anyway, right? So I don't have particular data on this, but I think, you know, what we see from the media and what we see from that we learn is that stopping school is actually more damaging than many. So we've seen for the economy and for, I think, you know, we've seen this in America, a lot of people were making the argument that, look, kids really must be in school for different reasons, right? For different reasons, perhaps because they have a stronger immune profile, they're not necessarily as affected we can protect them better, so forth and so on, right? So, and also it helps for the economy. So I think this is just my personal take. But again, I think this is perhaps, you know, beyond my my expertise at this point in time. I'm happy to have a offline conversation about this.
I think that's
Right,
it. No more question.
If I just can add a bit, nothing to do with Pak Fajal's question, but if anyone noticed in the Kompas Minggu last week, there was an article that on average every month, our run rate of deficit is about 100 trillion from the budget, from the government's budget, because as a developing country, it is not uncommon that we have a deficit because of the trade inflow and outflow. But on a normal run rate every month, we are short by 100 trillion rupiah every month. So that went on until March. So by March end, we had 300 trillion rupiah deficit in our budget. By June, which means that there are 2 additional months, April and May, our deficit, the government's deficit is 1,000 trillion. So meaning that the last 2 months, there was an additional 700 trillion deficit, which means that the run rate for the last 2 months during the COVID, at the peak of the COVID, was about 350 instead of 100. So it's 3.5 times more. So I think without trying to politicize all these things, but it is a big dilemma for government, for corporations, for individuals in dealing with this crisis, new normal. And the reason is, if we keep on doing this, the deficit will be bigger and bigger at the country level and at the corporation level. And the impact of the corporation level will be at the individual level. But at the same time, we don't want to continue the pandemic. So I think it is a real struggle on how to transition into the new normal. So for example, my daughter, for example, the school has announced that in the new academic year, it will be 1/3 virtual online, 2/3 will be face-to-face. So these are the things that people are trying to get into, trying to find a new normal. We are not suggesting that we would advise Ministry of Education, but definitely the way delivery model of learning can be different. In South Korea, for example, it has been since the last decade that 2/3 of their development programs are delivered through online. So that cuts the increase the speed, cuts the cost, but still give you the impact that you want. So I guess these are the things that we can be aware of. Thank you.
There's another question as to what's the best way to invest in new technologies for work from home and new business while keeping the expenses at lower level. Yeah, so again, I think in terms of, you know, I'm not a technology expert, but I think it's probably a matter of like comparing the different platforms and to decide to which one will work for you, right? So there are certain platforms that work very well for free, almost for free, right? So especially for one-on-one meetings and small group meetings, I think, you know, some platforms are very good and they're very cheap. If you want to have a little bit more sophisticated, of course, you have different platforms, which is, you know, we're on one of these platforms, but, you know, there are other platforms that can, and this is time to shop, right? So, and that's how to optimize your costs.
I think there are 2 questions coming up. The first one is from Rocky. I think it's about leadership. Stefan, I think that's your area.
Sure. So we have from Rocky?
Rocky,
yeah? Okay, Rocky from Jakarta. Okay, hi, Rocky from Jakarta. A lot of employees are demotivated because of company policy cutting their salary. While leaders have to maintain company sustainability, they also have to motivate these employees. True. Yeah, I guess. So in terms of cutting salaries, one thing that needs to be mentioned, I think there are at least 2 things that I can think of right now. One is, as a leader, you need to demonstrate empathy, right? Demonstrate empathy, a lot of empathy, a lot of understanding at this point in time. to say, look, this is a hard time, and to lead from the front. Therefore, if you're going to cut the employee's salary, you need to cut your salary first, right? And they need to know that, right? So you need to take a hit, take a bigger hit than your employees. Then your employees will be willing, a little bit more willing to follow you, right? So I think part of it is leading from the front. The second is the temporary nature of this crisis, right? So they need to understand. They need to understand that this is a tough time, but that it will pass. These too shall pass, right? And therefore, to have some kind of a gate within the next three months, 4 months, to say, look, we're going to reevaluate things and with an optimistic point of view toward that, to say, look, we will reevaluate that at that time, and if the crisis is over, we'll reinstate everybody, right? So a number of things. Again, empathy, leading from the front, and the temporary nature of these things. I think these are 3 key elements that I think could help. Fasil, would you like to add to this?
Yes, I agree with Paroki's question. We have to keep people motivated, but the question is, who do we mean by we? Employees. Let's say we have 1,000 employees, and understand that we have to be empathetical and we have to be financially conscious about whether we can survive and then continue, right? Because there are 2 parts of the question. Can we survive in this crisis? And we have the sustainability to bounce back. And cost is a big thing. If possible, like for example, in an airline case that we had, this was back many years ago during the financial crisis, rather than cutting salaries, it's better for them to improve their efficiency on procurement, because 5% of savings in procurement costs is actually 100% to the salary of the employees. Meaning that if they save 5% in procurement costs, it's the same as the total salary of the airline company that time. This is salary alone. Yeah? So in that case, why do we have to reduce headcount if it doesn't give the impact that we need? But different companies have different situation. The other question is, if we have 100 employees, do we need to keep them? Do we need to keep them motivated? Yes, but do we need to keep all the 100 people motivated? Even without crisis, the trickle-down effect of motivation, we don't need to have all people motivated. We just need a few that will trickle the effect down. So the hard question really is, do we need to keep a few people motivated, highly motivated and engaged, and then hopefully they will trickle down this positive impact to others? Or do we have to keep everybody committed and engaged? And please note, this is in a crisis situation, not in good times. So there is a saying, whether you spray and pray or focus. Spray and pray, you spray everything and pray that things will be back to normal, or just focus on few. Then that's really the philosophical question. Actually, there's another question from Bayulis Mana here. Indonesian government have decided to start a new normal when COVID positive chart is still going up in order to support the economy. Do you think it's a good call, or could be a potential disaster? And both of us are not in the position to answer specifically because we are not health experts, not government official. However, I think coming back to my point about 100 trillion deficit every month compared to the 350 run rate during the COVID, you're right. Then the question can be, are we just loosening up to save the economy with disregarding health? I'm sure that is not the intention. But it's been the 2nd week for us, yeah, Stefan, partial work from office. Since last week, we went to office. So Stefan, I was last week, and then now this week I'm working at home again. Stefan is the reverse. So this is already 2nd week of us doing that. Are we concerned? Were we concerned? Yes, we were. But this is where the leadership comes in every morning to check, making sure everything's out there, and then we have rapid tests. So I guess the at least for us, Conferi, is we are very concerned about people's motivation, every one of them. And luckily, we are not a big organization. But at the same time, we are also concerned about people's safety but at the same time, you have to continue doing business. So I think that's the trade-off that we play by saying, okay, don't let everybody come to office, cut it in half, in teams, for example. So think about those, and it's really a difficult question whether it's a good call or potential disaster.
Yeah, perhaps.
Question.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, that's fine. Perhaps if I can add a little bit to Basil here, I think. So for some developed economies, for example, this is an easier call to make, right? They can afford, they have like social safety nets that are, bigger. And our social safety net in Indonesia is, dramatically increasing, but still perhaps not there yet. So there's a point in time in the economy where this is, who do we protect, right? Are we going to lose more people through COVID-19 or through hunger? So this is where you need to make important choices there, right? So in other words, protect the economy. So as we were mentioning, there was a high official yesterday that we talked to, and he said, look, at the beginning, the first 90 days, it was protect the people. Now it's protect the economy, right? Protect the economy within reason, right? So if you have vulnerable people, they may not need to go out, right? So please stay home. If you're vulnerable, stay home. But for the rest of the people that can actually work and benefit to the economy, please go and actually contribute and put food on the table. So I think that's the message.
One last question. I hope this is from Anurag Kadian. Very interesting questions. What is the best way to invest in technology for working from home and new business while keeping the expenses at lower level? We answered anyone that. Want to answer? Yeah. Have you?
We answered this one already. I think there's another one, right? What about company target? You think it's time for company to relook on the company target? So I think it's a good question. Basil, I think you have a strong point of view on this, right?
My strong point of view is following what the experience we had. Flat is the new normal, right? So in other words, if we can deliver what we delivered last year, this year, it's normal. I don't think many people are expecting growth by the end of this 2020 fiscal year. But if we can just deliver what we delivered in 2019, business-wise, that's already good. So flat is the new normal. Now, the question is, next year, will there be a reduction of target? I guess it really depends on specifics of in the industries, because now even going to tempat ibadah, for example, to the mosque, to the churches, to the temples, now it's done virtual. Why I use that example is because that's one of the core fundamental belief in us people, right? So we can afford not going on an overseas trip or a leisure trip because of this. Yeah, of course we can. We can avoid not to do that. Even we don't go to tempat ibadah because of that. So my point is, will business be different next year? I believe it will be. The lingering effect of the post-pandemic will continue. Some industries will be positively affected, some are not. Hopefully the oil sector will be positively affected by next year. I believe if the people say that, the flat starts to happen. Actually, 1.5 weeks ago, we had a sharing session with our China team. It's a certain construction group of companies in Indonesia, because one of the learnings of China, they recovered quite quickly. And we had another sharing session with our colleagues from South Korea, because now South Korea, Taiwan are considered one of the safest places in the world in terms of pandemic management, crisis management. So will it be different? It will, but if we see the experience of some parts of China at least, and also Taiwan, they are already in the new normal, and they see things are stabilizing fast. So I think that's one thing that we can preempt.
I think that's all. If you guys have any other questions, you can just contact us. Or you can just contact directly to Pak Silvano and Pak Stefan. Thank you very much. Pak Silvano and Pak Stefan, that is very helpful. I'm sure we all learning at this moment. I like the quote, learning by doing. I'm doing it every day now. Anyway, before we close this webinar, I'd like to share a little bit about Proffhub. Second. Oh, okay. 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 What is Proffhub? It's basically we created this Proffhub based on the numbers from gig economy. One of the report from Intuitive, which is before COVID-19 pandemic, they said they work shift from full-time to free agents employments, which is, we see that jump or leapfrog, like all we know from brick and mortar retails, like Pak Silvano presented before. The online is on the up. So it's basically working independently is becoming a new, I think, a new normal, especially with the full-time job are not easily get outside there. From the MasterCard report in 2019, they predicted that the gig economy globally is around $17.2 billion. For Indonesia, take it 1% of penetration, so we would get around 1.8 trillion rupiah or 131 million US dollars. There's and that will be increased given that so many people signing up in our platform to get some projects or getting not full-time tasks or whatever, short terms. The increased supply and demand of this economy, of course, the following factors. Pandemic, one reason is because the rising of unemployment rates. As you know, the companies now preserving cash by slashing, I don't know, payrolls, perhaps, yeah. So this is kind of like giving, being a freelancer is a good option if you can't get any full time. So for companies, the same thing as well, like Pak Silvano said, outsourcing probably the best options at this moment if you cannot keep a good talents, without keeping them or hiring them the whole year, and I believe some of the talents as well prefer this way for whatever reasons, either flexible work-life environments instead of 9 to 5 work, or even some of the young people, they like to do something after their full time. This is more likely happening to programmers, for example. Yeah, they can work at night. So this is additional income for them, given the rising cost of living. Yeah. So outsourcing is, I think, is going to be a little bit on the trend. So that's why we come as a Proffhub. We are connecting independent professionals. Why professionals? Because it's independent. You don't have to worry how to coach them and so on. Yeah. So our vision is to enable Indonesia to expand and mature by continuously extending our operations, not only region but as well as expertise. How it works, I think, it's a little bit about the platform itself. There are 3 ways how to do this. Is one, you can select any packages in our website. The second, you can pitch to all specific industry, for example, digital marketing only, or market research only, or even marketing strategies only, or HR only, and so on. And the third one, or the third option, which is now is very interesting. Some of the global companies doesn't want to hire, but they want this person, they want to let go some people, why don't you join this platform, so we will hire you from this platform. So which is beautiful, you know, they know the capacity, they know the skill and everything, they trust the work. So this is one thing is on the up as well, you know. Once you ask for a proposal, and then you get it, you chat with them and everything in the platform, so including tracking the milestone of the projects. You can do everything from the platform without asking them, hi, what is the status of this? So the beauty of the next step of our platform is to have a function, to have a team. So for example, to launch a product or a brand, you know, you want a team, specific team of for marketing or for packaging and so on, you know, so you can have it as well in the platform. So this will be the next one that we're going to develop in the platform. The professional that we cover at this moment is listed in here. You know, it's quite extensive at this moment, and including marketing research, data analytics. There's on the trend as well. Many people want to hire them, but not so many supplies. And digital marketing is very active, you know. IT and network is like programming, you know, especially for brick and mortar companies, retailers, you know, they really need to be present online. Accounting and finance, HR, legal, design here is more towards a content design and so on. And coming up is young talents. We realize that now so sad to see the fresh graduates cannot get a job easily, as well as they cannot go to interns. So we're thinking about embracing these young talents and probably coach them or giving them some internship in some companies. So that's quite good too. So if you have any questions, you can just email our member support at support@proffhub.com. Right. I think that's all for today. Before we say goodbyes, again, save the dates for the next webinar next week. And from Ibu Yanti Nistro, are you surfing, swimming, or sinking, which is still in the crisis, I think. And Ibu Imra Martam from Beehive Consulting will speak from the consumer's perspective, from buying panic to new normal. All very interesting. If you cannot attend next week, you can just register. We will send you the link for the recording, including this webinar as well. We can send you the link after this. Thank you, Pak Stefan. Thank you, Pak Silvano. Much appreciate your contributions to our regular webinars. And everyone, thank you again.
Thank you, Bati. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Bye.
Good day. Cheers.
Cheers.